David Rodriguez adjusted the unfamiliar blue coveralls and stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of Technova Solutions. 43 years old, worth $200 million, and here he was about to mop floors in his own building. The employee satisfaction scores had been devastating. 78% of staff reported feeling undervalued. Morale was at an all-time low. Something was fundamentally broken in his company culture, and sitting in boardrooms wasn't going to reveal the truth. He tucked the fake ID badge into his pocket. For the next 2 weeks, he would be Dave Ramirez, new night janitor, hired through a temp agency. His assistant had been horrified at the plan, but David knew that real leadership meant understanding every level of your organization. The service elevator opened with a mechanical groan, and he stepped into the basement break room where the night shift gathered. 5 people sat around a scarred table, thermoses and brown bags spread before them. The conversation died as he entered. Marcus Chen looked up from his sandwich, dark eyes assessing the newcomer with quiet intelligence. There was something different about this one, David noticed immediately. While the others seemed worn down by their circumstances, Marcus carried himself with a subtle dignity that spoke of hidden depths. Susan, the shift supervisor, waved David over. She was probably 60, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades in service work. "You must be the new guy," she said warmly. "Welcome to the night crew. We take care of floors 12 through 25. Marcus here will show you the ropes." Marcus nodded politely, finishing his sandwich with careful precision. He wiped his hands on a paper napkin and stood, his movements economical and purposeful. "Ready when you are," he said simply. As they walked toward the supply closet, David found himself studying his guide. Marcus moved through the building like he understood its layout intimately, his key selecting the right door without hesitation. There was something almost scientific about how he organized the cleaning cart, each tool and chemical in its designated place. "Where in the world are you all watching from tonight?" David wondered silently as he followed Marcus down the pristine hallway. "What time is it where you are right now?" He had no idea that this simple decision to work undercover would change not just his understanding of his company, but the life of the quiet man walking beside him, pushing a cart that might as well have been carrying the weight of the world. Marcus demonstrated the proper technique for cleaning the server room, his movements precise and methodical. "Most people just spray and wipe," he explained quietly, "but these systems generate heat patterns that create specific dust accumulation zones. You have to understand the airflow." David paused mid-motion with his cloth. That was an oddly technical observation for a janitor. Marcus seemed to realize he had revealed too much and quickly changed the subject. "Been doing this for 3 years, he said simply. "You learn things." They worked in comfortable silence for 20 minutes, David observing how Marcus approached each task with an engineer's mindset. He noticed ventilation issues, reported a loose cable that could pose a fire hazard, and suggested a more efficient cleaning rotation that would reduce downtime. At midnight, Marcus excused himself for his break. Through the break room window, David watched him sit in his battered Honda Civic, phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, the conversation looked emotional. Marcus ran his hand through his hair repeatedly, a gesture of stress that David recognized from his own high-pressure days. When Marcus returned, his eyes were slightly red. "Everything okay?" David asked carefully. Marcus nodded too quickly. "Just checking on my daughter. She gets nightmares sometimes. The babysitter handles it, but Emma prefers when I talk to her." 8 years old, Marcus continued unprompted, as if he needed to explain. "Lost her mom 2 years ago. It's been just us ever since." His voice carried a weight that spoke of sacrifices and sleepless nights. David felt something shift in his chest. Here was a man working the graveyard shift so he could be available during school hours. A father choosing presence over career advancement, love over ambition. As they moved to the executive floor, Marcus's demeanor changed subtly. He worked more quietly here, almost invisibly. David understood why when Jennifer Walsh appeared unexpectedly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. "What are you two doing up here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "This floor should have been finished an hour ago." "Sorry, Miss Walsh," Marcus replied evenly. "Training the new guy takes extra time." Jennifer's lip curled in disgust. "Maybe if you people had any real skills, you wouldn't need so much handholding. Some of us have actual careers to manage." She stalked away, leaving David stunned by the casual cruelty. Marcus simply returned to his work, but David noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the way his jaw tightened with suppressed dignity. David was beginning to understand why his employee satisfaction scores were so low. The question was whether Marcus Chen represented the problem or the solution. The next evening, David arrived early and found Marcus already working, his efficiency remarkable even by corporate standards. Marcus had reorganized the entire supply room using what appeared to be lean manufacturing principles, with color-coded labels and optimized workflow patterns that would have impressed any operations manager. "You seem to have a natural understanding of systems," David observed, genuinely curious about this man's background. Marcus paused, wringing out his mop with mechanical precision. "Used to work in tech," he said quietly. "Before Emma needed me full-time. Sometimes old habits die hard." The admission hung in the air between them. David sensed there was much more to the story, but Marcus had already turned back to his work with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to keeping secrets. They moved through the building methodically, Marcus pointing out inefficiencies that corporate consultants had missed. "This printer location creates unnecessary foot traffic," he mentioned casually. "Moving it 15 feet would improve workflow by at least 20%. And that conference room design forces people to bunch up at the entrance, creating bottlenecks during shift changes." David found himself taking mental notes. How did a janitor develop such acute business instincts? More importantly, how many other brilliant minds were hidden in plain sight throughout his organization? At 2 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. His face went pale as he read it, and his hands began to shake slightly. He immediately dialed a number, stepping away for privacy. No, keep her home tomorrow," David heard him say urgently. "I'll pick up a double shift somewhere. We can't afford another emergency room visit this month." When Marcus returned, his composure was fragmented. David had seen that look before in high-level executives facing impossible decisions. The weight of responsibility that came with having no good options. "Everything all right?" David asked gently. Marcus's laugh was hollow. "Emma's got her mother's condition. Chronic respiratory issues. The medications are expensive, and our insurance barely covers the basics." He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Some days I wonder if she'd be better off if I'd kept my old job instead of trying to be the parent she needed." The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. David realized he was witnessing something precious and terrible, a man sacrificing everything for love, questioning whether his sacrifices were enough. In that moment, David understood that employee satisfaction scores were meaningless metrics. The real question was whether his company deserved people like Marcus Chen, or whether people like Marcus deserved so much better than what his company offered them. Over the following nights, David found himself looking forward to working alongside Marcus. There was something deeply calming about the man's presence, a quiet competence that spoke of inner strength forged through hardship. Marcus never complained, never spoke ill of anyone, and approached each task with a dignity that humbled David more than any boardroom presentation ever had. On Thursday evening, David discovered Marcus in conference room B after hours, sitting at the polished table with a laptop that had seen better days. Spreadsheets filled the screen, columns of numbers and medical terminology that looked more complex than most quarterly reports David reviewed. "Sorry," Marcus said quickly, closing the laptop. "Just updating Emma's medical records for her specialist appointment. The pediatric pulmonologist requires detailed tracking of her symptoms and medication responses." David noticed the precision of Marcus's language, the clinical vocabulary that spoke of extensive research and understanding. This wasn't a man simply following doctor's orders. This was someone who had educated himself at a graduate level about his daughter's condition. You know, Marcus continued, seemingly unable to stop himself from sharing, the interesting thing about chronic respiratory conditions in children is the correlation between environmental factors and symptom severity. I've been analyzing Emma's data for 2 years now, and I've identified 17 distinct variables that affect her breathing patterns. He pulled up a complex chart that would have impressed any data scientist. Temperature fluctuations, humidity levels, air quality indices, even barometric pressure changes. All meticulously tracked and cross-referenced with Emma's symptoms. This is remarkable work, David said honestly. Have you shared this with her doctors? Marcus shrugged with practiced modesty. They're busy people. I just want to make sure I'm giving them the most complete picture possible. Emma deserves the best care I can provide, even if I can't afford the best doctors. David studied the man across from him. Here was someone with analytical skills that rivaled his top executives, someone who had taken on medical research with the dedication of a PhD candidate, all driven by pure parental love. Marcus Chen wasn't just wasting away in a janitorial position. He was using every available moment to fight for his daughter's health with tools that most parents never even knew existed. As they returned to their cleaning duties, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Marcus moved through the world carrying invisible burdens that would have crushed lesser men, yet he did so with grace and intelligence that spoke of untapped potential. The question that haunted David was simple: how many Marcus Chens were there in the world, brilliant minds hidden behind humble circumstances, never given the chance to show what they were truly capable of achieving? Friday night brought an unexpected crisis. David arrived at work to find Marcus sitting in the parking lot, his car engine hood raised and steam billowing into the cold air. Marcus was on his phone, his voice strained with the particular desperation of a parent facing impossible logistics. I understand the babysitter rates go up after midnight, he was saying, but I can't leave work early. I'll lose the job. Can you please just stay until 6 a.m.? I'll pay you double. David approached cautiously. Car trouble? Marcus looked up, his face drawn with exhaustion. Radiator gave out. Emma's got a fever, and the babysitter is threatening to leave if I don't get home soon. But if I miss tonight's shift, Jennifer will fire me on the spot. She's been looking for a reason. Without hesitation, David pulled out his phone. I know a guy who does emergency repairs. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Marcus stared at him. I can't afford emergency rates. A regular tow to the shop will have to wait until payday. Don't worry about it, David said simply. We take care of each other on this crew. As they waited for the mechanic, Marcus opened up in ways that surprised them both. Emma used to love coming to my old office, he said quietly. I was a senior architect at Data Flow Systems. Corner office, 6-figure salary, stock options. Emma would sit at my desk and pretend to code on my computer. What happened? David asked gently. Marcus's voice grew distant. Sarah, my wife, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Emma was 6. Sarah needed full-time care, and Emma needed stability. I couldn't do both and maintain the 60-hour weeks that corporate demanded. So I made a choice. He looked directly at David then, his eyes clear despite the exhaustion. I've never regretted it. Sarah died knowing Emma was safe and loved. That's worth more than any corner office. David felt something crack open in his chest. What would you sacrifice for your child? He wondered silently, thinking of viewers around the world facing similar impossible choices. Share your thoughts in the comments if this resonates with your own experience as a parent. The mechanic arrived and diagnosed a simple fix. As Marcus's car rumbled back to life, he gripped David's shoulder with genuine gratitude. I don't know how to repay you, he said. David watched Marcus drive away to his sick daughter, and realized that some debts could never be repaid with money. They could only be honored through recognition, through opportunity, through finally giving brilliant people the chance to shine in ways that matched their hidden worth. Monday evening arrived with the weight of accumulated exhaustion. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usual precision replaced by the mechanical movements of someone running on pure willpower. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from the babysitter, each message tightening the lines around his eyes. Emma's breathing got worse over the weekend, he explained quietly as they began their rounds. The pediatric specialist wants to run more tests, but our insurance is fighting the authorization. They say the previous scans from 6 months ago should be sufficient. David had learned enough about Emma's condition to understand what that meant. 6 months was a lifetime when dealing with progressive respiratory issues in children. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Marcus attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Some nights I lie awake doing calculations. If I pick up weekend shifts at the diner, I can cover the copay for the new tests. But that means Emma spends more time with babysitters instead of me. If I don't get the tests, her condition might deteriorate to the point where she needs emergency intervention." He paused in his mopping, staring at the floor. "It's a math problem where every variable leads to failure. Stay present for your child but risk her health, or work more to afford her care but sacrifice the time she needs you most." As they moved through the executive floor, Jennifer Walsh emerged from the elevator with her usual disdain. She surveyed their work with the critical eye of someone perpetually dissatisfied. "This floor looks substandard," she announced. "I'm docking both your hours tonight." Marcus stepped forward respectfully. "Ma'am, we've followed the exact same protocol as always. Could you specify which areas need additional attention?" Jennifer's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Don't question my judgment. People like you are easily replaceable. There are dozens of applicants who would be grateful for these jobs." David watched Marcus absorb the humiliation in silence, his dignity intact despite the verbal assault. After Jennifer left, Marcus returned to his work without comment, but David noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the way he held his breath to maintain composure. That night, David made a decision that went beyond his undercover investigation. He began researching pediatric pulmonologists, insurance advocacy services, and emergency medical assistance programs. If the system was failing Marcus and Emma, perhaps it was time for the system to change. But first, he needed to understand just how deep this injustice ran, and whether Marcus Chen was strong enough to accept the help that was coming his way. Tuesday night brought the call that Marcus had been dreading. At 11:47 p.m., his phone rang with the shrill urgency that every parent recognizes as catastrophe. David watched Marcus's face drain of color as he answered. "What do you mean she can't breathe properly?" Marcus said, his voice rising with panic. "Have you used her rescue inhaler? How long has she been like this?" David stepped closer, ready to offer whatever help he could. Marcus was already moving toward the exit, his cleaning cart abandoned in the middle of the hallway. "I'm coming home right now," Marcus said into the phone. "If her lips start turning blue, call 911 immediately. Don't wait for me." He turned to David with wild eyes. "Emma's having a severe episode. I have to go, but if I leave shift early again, Jennifer will fire me tomorrow. I can't lose this job, but I can't let my daughter suffocate either." "Go," David said firmly. "I'll cover your sections and clock you out at the regular time. Jennifer will never know." Marcus gripped David's arm with desperate gratitude. "You don't understand. If she fires me, we lose our health insurance. Emma's medications cost $800 a month without coverage. But if I don't go to her now and something happens, I'll never forgive myself." The impossible mathematics of poverty and parenthood played out across Marcus's face. Every choice led to potential disaster. Every decision carried unbearable consequences. "Go to your daughter," David repeated. "Some things matter more than jobs." Marcus ran for the exit, leaving David alone with the weight of what he had witnessed. Here was a man being forced to choose between his child's immediate safety and her long-term survival. The system had created a trap so cruel that even love became a liability. David finished both cleaning routes that night, working until dawn with a fury that surprised him. What part of this story resonates most with you, he wondered, thinking of parents around the world facing similar impossible choices. Share your thoughts about the sacrifices we make for the people we love. As the sun rose over the city, David made a series of phone calls that would change everything. To his private physician, to his insurance coordinator, to his head of human resources. The time for observation was over. Marcus Chen had suffered enough, and David Rodriguez finally understood what real leadership actually meant. The question now was whether Marcus would accept help when it came, or whether pride would prove to be the final obstacle between a good man and the life his daughter deserved. Wednesday evening, Marcus returned to work looking like a man who had aged years in a single night. His movements were mechanical, his usual quiet dignity replaced by the hollow exhaustion of someone who had stared into the abyss of losing everything that mattered. David waited until their first break to ask the question he was dreading. "How is Emma?" Marcus sat heavily in the break room chair, his hands shaking slightly as he opened his thermos. "She's stable. For now. The emergency room doctor said her lung function has deteriorated since her last visit. She needs the specialized testing immediately, not in 6 weeks when our insurance might approve it." He took a sip of coffee and grimaced as if it tasted like ash. "The ER bill will be $2,200. The specialist consultation will be another $1,500. The new medication they want to try costs $400 per dose, and she needs it twice weekly." David did the math silently. Even with Marcus working double shifts, those numbers were impossible to reach. "I've applied for charity care at 3 different hospitals," Marcus continued, his voice flat with defeat. "They all require proof of income, and somehow making $40,000 a year means you're too wealthy to qualify for assistance, but too poor to actually afford medical care." He looked directly at David then, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I used to design software that managed healthcare systems. I understand the algorithms that determine who gets help and who gets abandoned. The irony is not lost on me that I helped create the very system that's now failing my daughter." That night, Jennifer Walsh appeared during their rounds with a clipboard and a predatory smile. "Chen," she announced, "you left your shift early yesterday without authorization. That's grounds for immediate termination." Marcus straightened his shoulders, preparing for the blow he had seen coming. "I understand, ma'am. My daughter had a medical emergency, but I should have found alternative coverage." Jennifer's smile widened. "However, I'm feeling generous tonight. Instead of firing you, I'm suspending you for 3 days without pay. Consider it a lesson in priorities." David watched Marcus absorb this cruelty in silence, his jaw working as he swallowed words that would have cost him everything. 3 days without pay meant 3 days without the money needed for Emma's medications. It meant 3 days closer to catastrophe, delivered with a smile by someone who had never faced an impossible choice in her comfortable life. After Jennifer left, Marcus returned to his work with robotic precision, but David could see the cracks forming in his composure. The weight of trying to hold everything together was finally becoming too much for even his remarkable strength to bear. Thursday night, David found Marcus in the break room staring at a collection of medical bills spread across the table like tarot cards predicting disaster. The numbers seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights: emergency room visit, specialist consultation required, insurance claim denied, past due notice. Marcus looked up when David entered, his eyes hollow with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to figure out which bill not to pay this month," he said quietly. "It's like playing Russian roulette with my daughter's life." David sat down across from him, noting the careful way Marcus had organized the paperwork by priority and due date. Even in crisis, his analytical mind was working. "The rent can wait 30 days before eviction proceedings begin," Marcus continued, his voice clinical and detached. "The car payment can be delayed 2 weeks before repossession. But Emma's medications can't wait at all. If she misses doses, her lung function deteriorates exponentially." He picked up a prescription bottle, shaking it to hear the few remaining pills rattle inside. "This costs $400 to refill. I have $63 in my checking account." The math is simple and impossible. David watched this brilliant man reduced to counting pills like a miser counting coins, and felt something break inside his chest. Marcus had approached poverty with the same methodical intelligence he had once applied to software architecture, but some problems couldn't be solved through analysis and optimization. "I used to think I was good at solving complex problems," Marcus said, attempting a laugh that came out as a sob. "I designed algorithms that processed millions of data points in real time. But I can't solve the simple equation of how to keep my daughter alive on a janitor's salary." His composure finally cracked, and tears began streaming down his face. "She asks me why other kids don't have to take medicine every day, and I tell her she's special. But the truth is, she's not special to anyone except me. To the insurance company, she's a liability. To her school, she's a problem child who misses too many days. To this job, she's an excuse for my poor performance." Marcus buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with suppressed grief. "I had everything once. A career, a future, respect. I gave it all up to save Sarah, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But Sarah died anyway, and now Emma is dying too, and I'm powerless to stop it." The raw pain in his voice filled the small break room like a physical presence. David realized he was witnessing the complete breakdown of a man who had carried impossible burdens with grace for too long. The question was whether Marcus was strong enough to accept the help that was finally coming his way. David moved his chair closer to Marcus, the weight of his hidden identity pressing down like a physical burden. He had come here to understand his company's culture, but instead he had discovered something far more important: the hidden cost of corporate indifference measured in human suffering. "Tell me about Sarah," David said gently. "What was she like?" Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his breathing still shaky from the emotional release. "She was a high school English teacher who could quote Shakespeare while changing a flat tire. Emma has her laugh and her stubborn streak. Sarah used to say that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a series of choices you made every day." His voice grew stronger as he talked about his wife. "When she got sick, I had a choice. I could maintain my career trajectory and hire professional caregivers, or I could be the husband and father they needed me to be. Sarah made me promise that if something happened to her, Emma would always know she was the most important thing in my world." David felt the full weight of Marcus's sacrifice settling over him. "You gave up everything for them." "Not everything," Marcus corrected. "I gave up money, status, career advancement. But I gained something irreplaceable. I was holding Sarah's hand when she died. I've been present for every milestone in Emma's life, every doctor's appointment, every school play. That's not sacrifice, that's privilege." He looked directly at David then, his eyes clear despite the tears. "Most people think I'm wasting my potential working as a janitor. They see the uniform and assume I'm uneducated or unmotivated. But I'm using my potential exactly as I choose to. I'm being the father Emma needs, even if the world doesn't value that contribution." David realized he was witnessing something extraordinary, a man who had redefined success in terms of love rather than achievement, presence rather than prestige. Marcus had made the choice that most people only claimed they would make, and he had paid the price with dignity. "The problem isn't that I regret my choices," Marcus continued. "The problem is that society punishes people for choosing family over career. Emma shouldn't have to suffer because I prioritized being her father over maximizing my earning potential." If this story touches your heart, David thought silently, let us know where you're listening from and how we can build a world that values people like Marcus Chen. In that moment, David understood that his undercover investigation had revealed something more important than employee satisfaction scores. It had shown him the difference between leadership and management, between profit and purpose, between seeing employees as resources and recognizing them as human beings worthy of dignity and opportunity. David sat in the silence that followed Marcus's revelation, knowing that the next few minutes would change both their lives forever. He reached into his wallet and pulled out his real identification card, placing it carefully on the table between the medical bills. Marcus looked down at the ID, his brow furrowing as he read the name. David Rodriguez, Chief Executive Officer, Technova Solutions. He looked up at David with confusion rather than recognition. I don't understand. Is this some kind of joke? I'm not Dave Ramirez, the new janitor, David said quietly. I'm David Rodriguez, the CEO of this company. I've been working undercover for 2 weeks, trying to understand why our employee satisfaction scores were so low. Marcus stared at the ID card as if it might transform into something else if he looked hard enough. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning horror. You've been lying to me this entire time? Everything I told you, everything I shared about Emma and Sarah, you were just collecting data? No, David said urgently. It started as research, but it became something much more important. Marcus, you are the most intelligent, dedicated, and principled person I've ever worked with. What you've shared with me wasn't data collection. It was a master class in leadership that no business school could ever teach. Marcus pushed back from the table, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. So this is what rich people do for entertainment? Dress up as janitors and collect sob stories from the help? Are you going to write a book about your adventure slumming with the working class? David felt each word like a physical blow, understanding that Marcus's trust had been shattered at the moment when he needed it most. Listen to me, please. Jennifer Walsh will be terminated tomorrow morning. You're being offered the position of Director of Software Development at a salary of $120,000, plus full medical benefits for you and Emma. Marcus laughed bitterly. Right. The janitor gets promoted to executive because the CEO felt sorry for him. That's not charity, that's humiliation with a bow on top. It's not charity, David said firmly. It's recognition. You've shown me optimization strategies that could save this company millions. You've demonstrated leadership qualities that most of my executives lack. Your technical background speaks for itself, and your character is beyond question. Marcus stood up, gathering his medical bills with shaking hands. Keep your pity job, Mr. Rodriguez. My daughter and I will find our own way forward. He walked toward the door, then turned back with tears in his eyes. I thought I had found a friend who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for the people you love. Instead, I found another rich man playing games with poor people's lives. 3 days later, David arrived at the children's hospital where Emma Chen was receiving emergency treatment. He found Marcus in the waiting room, his head in his hands, surrounded by the familiar chaos of medical crisis. The suspension had left Marcus unable to afford Emma's medications, and her condition had deteriorated rapidly. Marcus looked up as David approached, his eyes red with exhaustion and defeat. What are you doing here? He asked quietly. I'm here because Emma needs immediate care, and I'm here to make sure she gets it, David replied simply. He handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was a check covering all of Emma's medical expenses, past and future, along with a contract for the director position that required no response or commitment. This isn't about charity or pity, David continued. It's about recognizing that the best leaders aren't always the ones in corner offices. Sometimes they're the ones mopping floors while calculating complex medical algorithms for their children. Sometimes they're the ones who choose love over career advancement and still manage to optimize business processes in their spare time. Marcus stared at the check, his hands trembling. Why are you doing this? Because 2 weeks ago, I thought leadership meant maximizing shareholder value and improving efficiency metrics. You taught me that real leadership means creating a workplace where people like you don't have to choose between being present for their children and affording their children's medical care. That afternoon, Emma Chen received the specialized treatment that saved her life. The new medication began working immediately, and her breathing improved dramatically. When she was finally stable, Marcus found David in the hospital corridor. I owe you an apology, Marcus said quietly. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on you. You didn't deserve that. You don't owe me anything, David replied. But Emma deserves a father who doesn't have to choose between caring for her and supporting her. Technova deserves leaders who understand that every employee has a story worth honoring. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in his new office overlooking the city, watching Emma play in the company's newly installed family center. As director of software development, he had revolutionized 3 major systems and mentored dozens of employees facing their own impossible choices. The wall behind his desk held 2 photographs, one of Sarah holding newborn Emma, and one of Emma's first day visiting Daddy's new office. Both pictures reminded him that success wasn't about climbing ladders or maximizing income. Success was about creating a world where love and work could coexist, where dignity was recognized regardless of job title, and where every parent could be present for the people who mattered most. And sometimes, success looked like a CEO who learned that the most valuable insights came not from boardrooms, but from break rooms where real people shared real struggles with uncommon grace.